Years ago, I was dragging myself through an 8th century meditation manual called the Bhavanakrama, written by Kamalashila. Bhavanakrama translated as stages of the path of meditation, and is still, even though it's from the 8th century, it's still probably the most influential text on how we understand meditation and the progress of the stages through meditation. And in this text, I'm almost positive it's the Bhavanakrama. It might be one of his other texts, might be one of his commentaries on Nagarjuna, but I'm pretty sure it's the Bhavanakrama. He says this line, which is so disturbing to me and intriguing that I, for about 10 years, I couldn't shake it. I just, still to this day, I mean, I think about it all the time. And what's the line? The line is this. He says, desire exists before the object of desire presents itself. That's all. I mean, pretty straightforward sentence. Normally, this is the kind of sentence that I wouldn't really get, and my mind would just kind of glaze over it and then numb out for the next 3 pages, and then I'd have to backtrack and try to remember what I was reading. But for some reason, it just caught me, and I just kept rereading over and over. Desire exists before the object of desire presents itself. And I was so confused and even disturbed by this idea. So what does it mean that desire exists before the object of desire presents itself? Well, let's take a bar of chocolate for an example as the object of desire. We normally think we're moving through our day and then we hear about a bar of chocolate, or we see one, or we hear an advertisement for one, and then we think, ooh, I would like that chocolate. I would like to get that bar of chocolate. So we normally think that the outer object is creating the inner desire for the bar of chocolate. And we can also reverse this, and the same thing holds true, is that annoyance exists before the object of annoyance presents itself. So we think oftentimes we're moving through our day and then something says something to us that's annoying or disturbing, that disturbs our peace of mind. And then we're disturbed because of that object of disturbance has come into our lives. But Kamalashila is saying something radically different. He's saying, no, the disturbance in your mind or the desire in your mind exists first, and then it's almost projected onto the external object and projecting either desire or aversion, attraction or aversion, desire or annoyance, right, onto that object. So the birthplace of these things are not the objects, but they're the birthplace is in our mind. And it's a difficult thought, it's a difficult concept, but I had a disturbing night's sleep last night, and I think it might help us understand the concept that Kamalashila is talking about. And it turns out to become really quite important for our lives. So right now the junipers and the emery oaks are releasing a lot of pollen, and it's kind of triggering my allergies. So last night as I was trying to sleep, I was so clogged up I kept waking up not being able to breathe. And so I'd wake up kind of gasping for air a little bit. But here's what kept happening over and over again. So here's the reality is I just can't breathe, right? And I'm waking myself up. But what my dream did is every single time this happened, it put a new storyline, a new narrative onto the why I couldn't breathe. So at first, the first one was, or one of them was, like I was standing on this cliff and I jumped off the cliff into this beautiful pool of water. And I was so high on the cliff that I kept going down and down and down. And I was having to hold my breath while I was descending into the water before I started coming back up. And then I woke up gasping for air. And that seems like a normal sequence of events. Like, oh, I had a dream that I jumped off a cliff and I was going down in water and I couldn't get air, and so then I gasped for air, right? That seems like, oh, that's a normal sequence of events. But what Kamalashila is saying, and what my dreams really showed me last night, was that the order is reversed. Because I kept having one dream after another, and the narrative or the storyline kept changing. So really what was happening was I was starting to like asphyxiate or not be able to breathe. And then my brain very quickly created this whole narrative onto why that was happening. We see something similar in people who have had their corpus callosum severed. So the corpus callosum is that nerve fiber that connects the two hemispheres of the brain. And these studies are really wild, and for me, they're really hard to wrap my mind around. No pun intended. But so let me give you an example of one. So they'll show a patient an image, and one hemisphere of the brain, they'll show an image, and it says, get up and walk. So that person will get up and walk. But that person doesn't actually know why they're getting up and walking. And then the doctor will say to them, oh, why are you walking? And they'll say instantaneously, they'll overlay a narrative that explains their actions. So instantaneously, their mind has created a story, and the mind will say, oh, because I need to go get a drink of water, or oh, I'm just getting up to stretch my legs because I have a cramp, or oh, I just need to use the bathroom, right? These stories will instantaneously come up. But the real reason they're getting up and walking is because they just saw a sign that said, please get up and walk, right? Something like that. So this was what I was doing. This is what I started to notice in my sleep, was that, oh, I was having trouble breathing. And then the mind would instantaneously create this whole background, like a background narrative to why I couldn't breathe. And then I thought that caused a relationship. So this, in essence, is what Kamalashila is saying. So Kamalashila is giving us a perceptual model. And see the pattern here. Try to see the pattern. And the pattern is that over time, systems usually become rigid, concretized, frozen, reified. And we see this, for example, in the physical heart, the health of the heart. Over time, the arteries become blocked, they become rigid, the heart loses plasticity and flexibility. But we can also see this in the emotional heart, that as we lock into our stories of why we think things are the way they are, and as we lock into and reify our narratives and our storylines, we lose a certain flexibility, a certain freedom of responsiveness. So what can we do with this idea? Well, in some ways, the most useful, and in many ways the hardest, is can we just identify the narratives? There's this idea of lucid dreaming where you can actually start to become lucid while you're dreaming. The narratives are still going on, but you're less convinced by their solidity. You can kind of see the emptiness of the narratives. So you can also practice lucid waking, where in your waking state you start to see the narrative, but you're not so trapped by that narrative. So that's what we're working with here, is first just can we identify the narrative, and then once we identify it, can we just loosen up a little bit? Can we create some space around it? Can we defreeze it or de-reify that narrative?